Brodrick Jones, or Jonesy, is a puppeteer and creator whose wildly inventive puppet pieces are filled with his hilarious sense of humor. From his web series Jigsaw to his one-man show UBU FAUST that played in Edinburg, to his standalone puppet pieces that have been featured at the National Puppetry Conference, Jonesy is incredibly talented and prolific. I talked to Brodrick Jones about his puppetry career on this episode of Under the Puppet. You're listening to Saturday Morning Media. And now, back to our show. Welcome to the show that is preserving puppetry through the personal stories of professional puppeteers. My name is Grant Pachoco, and this is Under the Puppet. Brodrick Jones, welcome to Under the Puppet.
Hooray! Thank you so much for having me. It's really, really nice to be here.
I am super excited to talk to you because from the first moment I met you at the O'Neill, and we're going to talk about the O'Neill and all that kind of stuff, but from the first moment I saw one of your pieces, I go, this is one of my favorite puppeteers ever. This is one of my favorite creators, and you're just an inspiration, and I love all your work, and so I'm excited to talk to you about that work. But I do want to start, like I always do, by asking you if you remember your first exposure to puppetry, the first time you saw puppets.
Wow. It would have been Sesame Street. And while I don't actually remember the actual exposure itself, I vividly remember a nightmare I had when I was 3 years old. And I know it when I was 3 because it was in the house where I grew up in South Carolina, and we left there and moved to Virginia when I was 4. So I vividly remember, because it's one of the ways I remember the layout of this house and where the living room was and where the TV was in the living room. And the nightmare was watching an episode of Sesame Street and having Ernie come up to the camera and say, "I have one tooth." And he opens his mouth and he points to one tooth in his mouth. Already creepy.
Yeah.
And then Grover comes on and "I have 10 teeth," and opens his mouth. There's 10 teeth in Grover's mouth. And then Big Bird comes on and says, "I have 100 teeth," and opens his mouth really slowly, and it's just jagged shark-like rows of teeth going back for infinity. And in the dream, I hid behind the television because I didn't know what else to do to make it go away. So clearly,
yeah,
I was watching Sesame Street, and that was puppetry haunting my dreams.
And that's when you said, "I want to be a puppeteer."
And that's when I gave it up for 30 years.
Oh man, yeah, that is definitely a memorable dream. Did you play with puppets at all as a kid? Was that in your thing, or
it's weird. I did somewhat, but I don't have a lot of memory of that. I remember being really into puppetry in terms of, I was very much the right age for Muppet Show being in syndication still, so being able to watch that daily, and watching Sesame Street until I was way too old for Sesame Street, following like Great Space Coaster and those, some Sid and Marty Krofft stuff, and like all of that just being around perpetually. All the Henson style, Muppet style, mouth puppet stuff. And so I would, do that, but it didn't really register that I was doing something. It was just part of play.
Yeah.
And it was more frequent that I would make my stuffed animals like move around and talk to each other. So I was already doing object puppetry without knowing that was a thing at an early age.
You have your pieces have a lot of like an art style where you're drawing things and the backgrounds are drawn, and there's different kind of little drawn elements to things. Were you drawing at an early age too? Is that something
Very
you've
much
always done? Yeah.
Yeah. At the same time that I was absorbing a lot of puppet stuff, I was at the height of Charles Schulz Peanuts, and my family were huge into Peanuts. So I had all of the collections, and we had this amazing book of the Smithsonian Institute collection of newspaper comics going back 100 years, and I would just read that over and over and over again, and had, Little Nemo and Slumberland, and it had Gasoline Alley, and it had old Popeye comics that were totally anarchic and weird. So I was absorbing comic strips as a lifeblood and drawing constantly. And I have an old thing from like kindergarten, first grade, something like that. Like, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be an artist, was always what I would say. Like, I will paint pictures and I will sell them for $3 a piece, because $3 seemed like a lot of money.
That is a lot of money. Yeah. Now you mentioned your family. Was your family creative at all? Were they participating in creative arts in some fashion?
Yeah, my whole family is sort of a family of black sheeps, in a weird way. My mom was really is really still very good about supporting the arts, not just in the community, but in making sure that they were available to her children. And so, whatever we expressed interest in, she would make a way for us to pursue it. I have two brothers. They're 10 and 12 years older than I am. All three of us did theater growing up. Like, I remember my brother Joel, who went on to become a playwright and improv teacher and novelist, and he performed for many, many years. And he always said, like, Brett's actually a better actor than I am. He just doesn't want to do it anymore. So, very theatrical family. My mother is more of a techie, did a lot of costuming, and when she was in college, she painted sets and like helped with lighting grids back in, the lights will kill you days. And, so we had this enormous literature collection and music collection and theater collection. My father was a drama teacher and English teacher, and unfortunately, he died when I was 6 months old. So I never got that from him directly, but his influence was always felt in his books and his music and his legacy, that he helped raise my brothers and helped them find their outlet for the first time. When I was in my 20s, I found a few audio cassettes that were my dad's, unmarked, like old, tape, like blank tapes that he taped something onto. And I found an old tape player and I put it in and I started listening. I was like, oh, this is kind of scratchy. The quality's not great. Wait, that's Peter Cook and Dudley Moore. Wait, that's like some old British comedy stuff. Okay, so clearly I got that from him. Didn't know it.
Yeah, well, I was gonna ask. That's actually one of the questions I was gonna ask is that your pieces always have a great sense of humor to them, and they can tell an important message, but they're very funny, I think, in the way they deliver the message. And I was gonna ask, who are some of your comedic influences that you feel you've drawn from?
I studied so much comedy, especially, being in high school in the late 80s, early 90s, when the huge stand-up bubble was at its peak and you could watch stand-up comedy and sketch comedy basically any time of day on many different networks. I would put in a tape and record 6 hours of stuff and then watch it back and see how it worked. And at the same time, Monty Python's Flying Circus was on at midnight on MTV. And so I would tape those and watch them over and over and over again. I wore out a copy of the Blues Brothers. I wore out a copy of Holy Grail. I actually dubbed that movie to an audio tape so I could listen to it in the car, and at one point had it memorized, not the whole movie. I was one of those insufferable Monty Python kids who would just be quoting sketches and routines constantly. It's actually how I picked, when I went to Emerson College. I was touring school, senior in high school. I walk into the theater building and I hear people doing a Monty Python bit in the other room, and they have the lines right. I'm like, I'm home. Okay, we're here. I don't need to apply anywhere else. But I watched a ton of Carol Burnett show. She was astounding. Later on, I would watch like Dick Van Dyke Show, especially watching Mary Tyler Moore, just what a incredible delivery and incredible timing way to take a bunch of material that is kind of like secondary to the wacky characters and just make a meal of it. In college, I did a really deep dive into Burns and Allen and watching the genius that was Gracie Allen and how George Burns like set her up to succeed. And then when she was taken way too soon, how he couldn't think of a better act to do, so he would just do both parts. And did that for what, 50, 60 years? So a lot of old vaudeville stuff. I adored Marx Brothers movies. Later on, there was a turning point in college when I was in a You Can't Take It With You my senior year. And that was directed by Davis Robinson, who is an incredible, incredible comedic director, actor, performer, like neo-vaudevillian. And our first rehearsal for that show, he's like, okay, here's a screwball comedy classic. And so our first rehearsal, we didn't even look at the script. He sat us in a room and he played Bringing Up Baby for us. And he said, okay, I want you to count how many seconds there are between lines. Just watch the movie, but keep in mind, how many seconds are there between the lines? And it took very little time before we realized, like, oh, there's no seconds between the lines. People are talking just right when the other person stops talking constantly, or they're talking over each other. And it totally works because they're listening to each other at the same time. I see what you want. And it was just such a simple way of teaching us pacing and just saying like this is the way we talk. Is the reason why these things still hold up is that that's how humans actually talk to each other. These are just well-crafted lines that actually work all together, and they make a nice little gear. And if you have too long a pause between lines, it's going to throw the rhythm off, and it's not going to feel like a ride anymore. So that got me perpetually thinking about timing, pacing, and remembering that the words that are on the page are often there for a reason and that there's a rhythm to them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. That is that it's perfect comedic advice, I think, for anyone to and what a great. I was also in You Can't Take It With You, and it's so much fun to play as well. I almost wish I was in your version because we didn't get that little I mean, our version was great, but we didn't get that little, thing at the beginning. It was like, forget the play. We're gonna look at this first,
Yeah. Here's the context of the play.
Yeah.
It was also great because it was completely gender bent and like cross-racial, cross-gender casting. It was just whoever was the right person got the part.
Yeah.
And so it managed to sidestep all of the sort of questionable legacy things of like, well, they're this supposedly anarchic family, but they do have African American servants. But we managed to avoid that by leaning into the fact that this was all very strange. We also had the guys that did the Boston 4th of July fireworks display every year do our pyrotechnics for the end of Act 1.
Wow.
Which meant that we could only afford to do 3 shows total. But that was fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine. You did theater in college. Was that where you got your degree in? Or is
Yeah,
that what you were studying?
yeah, I got a degree in BFA in theater, a minor in film. I also took a ton of writing classes while I was there, comedy writing and poetry and short stories, things like that, because Emerson had a great writing program when I was there. And I got a scholarship. So I had extra money left over for tuition. So instead of getting a job during the summer, I would just take more classes to the point where sometime in my junior year, they started begging me to graduate because I had too many credits. Like that, I don't have my degree yet. I'm staying. You can't get rid of me. So yeah, I tried to get as much out of school as I could because I knew that it was a playground And I was surrounded by incredibly talented, incredibly creative people and wanted to work with as many of them as possible. And then proceeded to not really do much theater for the rest of time. That's not true. I've done a smattering of theater, but after I got into puppetry more more realistically, I discovered like, no, that's what I want from theater. This is the experience I want. I don't really want to be inhabiting my own body on stage as much, or at least not without a lens of puppetry to squeeze my big gigantic head through.
Well, what was that thing that like how did you start taking puppetry more seriously? What was that event or what was that thing that kind of focused you on that?
Well, it's so strange because I didn't even consider puppetry a thing. Partly, I think, because I was so indoctrinated to think that puppetry was Muppet style, Henson style. I didn't have a background in shadow puppetry or in marionettes apart from, Howdy Doody and bad boardwalk marionettes. I didn't have a bunch of hand puppet shows that weren't very, very questionable quality hand puppets. So I didn't have that background to know that that was somewhere I could go. That said, when I was in a sketch comedy troupe in college and one of the sketches was sort of a Sesame Street song, I like found the puppets, coached the folks, made a really bad walk around puppet for myself. That was essentially just a towel that had some silly putty eyes that I could see through so that I could play the music on stage when we would all these random puppet things would happen and I would like go, oh, well, you do it this way, obviously. And then I'd move on with the rest of my life. It wasn't until much later, many iterations of after going through a period of being a stand-up comic and improv comedian for a few years, and then being a comic book artist for a few years, and then going back to art school for a while, and then getting really back into comic books and deciding to be a retailer and opening a store and then moving the store and then needing to advertise and decided one day that I would make a puppet and like, well, he needs someone to talk to, so I'll make another puppet. And then it wouldn't be great if I could take myself out of the equation talking about the store and I could just have these two puppets run the store. And like when people show up, I'm just the hired help and they actually run it. So yeah, I'll just do some, and YouTube's new, like it's free. I'll get a camera, I'll start filming it. I don't know what I'm doing, but that's fine. I just need to advertise the store. And so I have the puppets and started making them talk to each other. And they then discovered almost immediately that I preferred working on the puppet videos more than I liked running the store or doing much of anything else. And so when the building was sold and we had to move out again, I was like, I'm not reopening the store. I'm going to continue doing the puppet show though. And that was Jigsaw.
That was Jigsaw, yes. I love Jigsaw, and you know that I'm a huge fan of Jigsaw. So these characters, Milton the robot and Dr. Cranium, so you just built those specifically because those early sketches take place in the comic book store, working at the register, or talking about what's going on in the store. You built them specifically for that? They didn't exist as ideas elsewhere?
Not at all. So Milton, when I was writing emails, the weekly email newsletter for the store, I quickly got bored of writing, here's what's new in the store today. And so I started coming up with comedy bits, sketches, and mostly I would make it so I could do a weird dialogue with myself in the body of the email. And so I could do a call and response and basically just I was writing scripts. And in one or two of them, there was this conceit of an automatic, artificial intelligence email writing program that I developed to write the emails for me that quickly became snarky and wanted to be free of its responsibilities. And it was the MBOT email mail system. And at one point, it asked me to build it a body. And then just sitting around, I was like, maybe it'd be funny if I actually built him a body. I could make it a puppet. Yeah, why not? And so MBOT became Milton. And as I was scouting out new locations for the store, I took the puppet with me and like did a few test runs with the camera. Like, this will be great. I can do advertising. Needs a second person though. And in the store, I had a gumball machine that I converted into spitting out tiny postage stamp size comics that I drew. And one of them was called Dr. Cranium versus the Invisible Monster with Black Lipstick. And Dr. Cranium was this weird rectangular headed scientist with steampunky goggles that I weirdly saw the silhouette of in some peeling paint outside my window and doodled one day. And then I made this comic book. And then when I was thinking of like, well, who would Milton the robot talk to? Well, Dr. Cranium is a mad scientist, so maybe he built Milton. That works. And it'd be like a ventriloquist style dummy. So like that's actually easier to work with a mouth puppet and then a vent mech on the other hand, so I can put it down if I need to do something. Oh, yeah, that could work. I don't know anything about vent puppets, but I'm sure I can figure it out. And so, yeah, they were entirely built just for doing a few ads on YouTube for the new comic book store. And which it's a miracle that the original Dr. Cranium puppet lasted for as long as he did, because it was made out of a protein powder canister and some mat board and rubber bands and was very, very front heavy because the nose and mouth were sculpey. So they were the only heavy piece. So he would lean forward. So a lot of the old videos, you see him leaning forward. And of course, it was a stick that was the wrong length for the handle, with no ball or anything on the end. So it would just dig into my palm whenever I used it. And I made the trigger so that it could be switched sides depending on what hand I was using. So it would fall off all the time in the middle of a take. Good times.
Well, it's funny because I was looking over all your stuff before this interview, and I was like, you have a great website that has pictures of all the things, a lot of the things that you've done, and I was like, his, you use all these different styles of puppets. You use humanettes, you use rod puppets, you use glove puppets in your stuff, and I said, he really doesn't have like a Muppet style puppet. It's all these kind of other styles. Then I thought, oh, well, Milton is like sort of the closest to that. And he's a robot. So he's sort of this box. Like when you look at him, you don't instantly think like, oh, that's like a Muppet style puppet,
Right.
because he's very boxy and covered in, foil or whatever.
Because
So
he's just a sock puppet that I've put some things onto.
yeah, but it was just interesting that is that like a choice? Like you're just like, yeah, everybody's doing that. I'm gonna do my own things. Or is it a practical thing where it's like you said, it's like I have to do two at one time, so this will be easier if it's event style puppet.
Yeah, a lot of it is actually it was birthed of practicality and also the fact that I don't really like building. I've built a few mouth puppets. I am okay at it. I do not enjoy the process. And with Milton, it was just really it was a sock that I sewed a thumb onto, and then it's a box that slides onto my upper hand and a smaller box that slides onto my lower hand. And then the body is another box that I stick my arm through first. So the entire puppet is multiple parts that you have to assemble. But even then, it's like if I need to be able to type something or something like that in the middle of production, I pop the head off and I've got all my fingers back.
Yeah.
And like the body is flopping around, banging against the keyboard while I try and fix something on the computer. And then Cranium I can pick up with a handle, and then Milton I can just shove my hand back into the head. And then since then, yeah, it's I discovered that by doing other types of puppets, I would be able to do a lot more in terms of building my personal ensemble for whatever show I'm doing. Just having the ability to have my hands free is is great. And that, it's where I started working with so much humanette stuff, is because then I don't have to worry about, I have a puppet that I can work while I'm thinking about other things, because
Right.
it's alive no matter what, because it's me. So while I'm shouting at the world, maybe doing some arm rods with one hand, I can be like finding the dropped prop or getting the next scene set with my other hand. And that's why even doing hand puppets, instead of slipping in, when I built UBU FAUST, my full length show, it's all heads with a slot and a one singular hand puppet glove with hands that stick on my fingers. And so that way I can swap heads really, really fast, so that one character can exit and the other one is already up, because I've placed the heads in a very specific order behind stage. And I'm still up as the humanette interacting with all these things.
Yeah. Yeah, it's brilliant. I always love the look of your stuff, and you know, you're developing hands-free puppetry, which I think is something we eventually need. If we could only get rid of, we really didn't have to use our hands in puppetry.
One of the first shows I did that wasn't Jigsaw, and probably the first puppet show I did on stage, was for Puppet Playlist in New York, and it was the They Might Be Giants show. Puppet Playlist, for listeners who might not know, old variety show in New York, ran for years and years and years, where the producers, Sinking Ship Productions, would select a musical artist, and then they would hire local musicians and local puppeteers, or puppeteers from wherever, to create something for one song from that chosen artist. And then it would alternate, so that you have a puppet act and then a live music act, and then a puppet act and then a live music act, which helped cover transitions. And it also meant that you got exposed to really cool local musicians, and it was a really cool show. And everyone had to select one song, so you only got this, one of each song, and so there's no overlap. Songs are typically 3 or 4 minutes, so the show can never be too long. It was a great format. So one of the first shows I did was that show, and I did a Piece of Dirt by They Might Be Giants, and I sang and played accordion live during the show, and had a mouth puppet rigged to the stage, immovable. So my right hand was stuck and my left hand was playing the accordion. So I did the rest of the show with foot pedals. So I had foot pedals that would raise and lower various elements on the stage to go with the jokes that I was building in the song. It was so poorly built because I didn't know anything. It was like this clunky PVC frame, and like just pieces of wood with hinges, and not even monofilament, like not even fishing line. It was just like string. I know Tim Lagasse is like, you have to rebuild that show. That show was amazing. You have to rebuild it. Like I don't I don't know how. Like, we will figure it out. I will talk to Flansburgh. I will get you the rights to the song. It's like, it's only been performed twice. It's done.
Well, look, you've done a lot of things like what you've done with Puppet Playlists. I know you do a lot of these sort of puppet slam type things. I'm not trying to pigeonhole Puppet Playlist into a puppet slam or whatever, but because it's sort of a different thing. But you've done these kind of things where it's like, oh, you get a topic, you're going to build for a show, and I know you did the LA Guild, Puppetry Guild's film festival. Do you like sort of that thing where it's like, okay, I've got this topic, I've got this amount of time, build. Do you like that kind of pressure?
I like it sometimes. It definitely, I'm getting to the point in my, I wouldn't say career, I would say lassitude or just old aching bones that it really needs to be a topic that interests me. There was definitely a time earlier in my life when I would do that, just sort of like, oh, there's another one of these. What is the topic? Okay, let's go. And as I've gotten older and like, you know what? I've got some other things I'm working on. Maybe I'll wait around until it's a topic I actually care about. Um, but that, I mean, that was even true before puppetry. I remember one of my most widely published comic book stories was for an anthology, and it was like the theme is biography, and you have a limit of 8 pages, and it's due on, submissions are due this day. Go. And so I did a story from P.T. Barnum's autobiography, and got into this anthology, and it was like a great feeling, like, hey, I did it. And so a lot of my early published comic book work was similar things of like, we're doing an anthology, it's this theme, you have this long, go. And so I was sort of familiar with that. Um, and it is a great way of sparking ideas. It is a great way of, which is not to say that ideas are a commodity. Ideas are everywhere. Ideas are constant. It's just not all of them are good. Ideas are too plentiful. And so when you have a theme to work off of and a deadline, it manages to focus, like, okay, I don't have enough time to find the perfect idea, so I'm going to go with the right idea that fits the theme that I can execute in time. And then sometimes it's great, and sometimes like, great, I'm glad I did that challenge. I will never have to do it again because if I retire it, no one's going to care.
Yeah.
Um, and it's also just a great way of, puppet slams and the like are wonderful places to invest time and energy without lots of money. I think they're crucially important for people beginning their life to have access to something like that. Some venue where they can get their work seen and get response, without having to invest thousands of dollars to try and mount a show. I would not have nearly the concept of what I want to be doing with puppetry or anything else if it weren't for going to open mics, doing like open mic stand-up nights, and doing, group shows, and doing music coffee houses and puppet slams and all of these things that are like, here, come do something in front of people in a room where no one's gonna really make fun of you. They're not, they might snicker a little bit, but that's informative too. Mostly it's, you got to have a place where you can get up and fail so that you can learn how to succeed.
Yeah, perfect, perfect. I was gonna say it's the slam's a great place because you're like, I have this great idea, then you put it up on stage and go, oh, this is not
This is not a good idea.
not a good idea, and that's very valuable to learn that.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, it is. So you're not wasting your time. I did want to ask one other thing. I know we kind of moved away from Jigsaw, but I was just curious about this. When it started out, it was filmed in the comic book store and in and around different things, comic store, and then in later seasons, because you kind of broke them into seasons, you kind of had this set, and it was just a panel with lights on it and TV screen and all this stuff. I'm curious, like, how big was that set? Where was that up? I was that in your house, or was that somewhere? Or
that
tell me about
that
that set.
set was, and the set evolved. But the set was always, after I think season 3, was the corner of my desk, and the monitor was in fact my computer, and it's a foam core sheet with some holes cut in it, and some, silver spray paint, and uh, some other little foam core greeblies pasted to it, and it velcroed onto the front of the computer. So I would get whatever QuickTime movie I was using for the the background screen going on in the window, and then put the thing on. And the rest of the set was just built out of some shipping pallets, and I don't know. Looking at it, it's a bread tray and a weird shelf that I found at Goodwill, and lots of packing forms, cardboard, old Christmas lights. Yeah, it's roughly what is that? 3 feet, but I can measure it. It's right there.
You don't.
Let's see.
He's
It's
getting out the tape measure.
about 3 feet by about 30 inches.
There it is, the official height and width.
So yeah, it was always a difficult thing trying to crop out the rest of the normal place until I decided that I didn't care that much. But it did keep growing and growing over time to make setting up shots a little bit easier, so I wouldn't have to frame out quite as much. But I mean, there are almost no episodes of Jigsaw until maybe season 4 where I even had a monitor apart from the screen on the camcorder. It was all very, very ramshackle. There's one episode where the camera pans down to see me on the floor underneath my desk with the puppets in my hands. And that's very telling for how it was all set up.
Well, I highly recommend people check out Jigsaw because it is a lot of fun. I'll have a link to it in the show notes. As I said earlier, I met you at the O'Neill,
Yeah.
and the National Puppetry Conference is something that you have been involved with a lot. So I would just love to know, like, how did you first find out about the O'Neill, and then some of your experiences going there.
I found out about the O'Neill because of a friend from Boston who found my puppet show and started saying, you have to go to the O'Neill. Carol Sims D'Agostino, who now works at the Center for Puppetry Arts. I think she's still there.
Yep, she is.
Yeah, so we knew each other back in the Boston days, back in the late 90s. And she was hosting an open mic night at the MIT Electronic Research Society. And she would always start the show with object puppetry. And then it was the best open mic of all time, because someone would get up and do spoken word, and someone would get up and do an original song. And then the guy that invented the game of life would show off one of his old prototypes. And then you'd get taken into the back to be given a demonstration of plate tectonics using giant steel plates with differing motors under them. And then someone would get on a tall bike and ride around and shoot off a potato cannon. And that was like the night. Like, okay, great. So we knew each other through that. And so then she found me doing a silly puppet show on YouTube. I was like, you have to go to the O'Neill. And I said, what's that? Like, it's the National Puppetry Conference at the Eugene O'Neill Theater Center, and you should apply. And I said, okay. And then I didn't. And then the next year she badgered me again. And I was like, maybe. And then I didn't. And finally I looked into it and was like, okay, yeah, I guess I'll try this. And my first year was working with Marty Robinson in Puppet Anarchy. And it was perfect, because it was like, I want to explore all these different forms of puppetry that aren't Muppet style over the course of a week. And I did the pre-conference with Jim Krupa, learning how to do mechs that weren't terrible, bad hinges with string and bad rubber bands mechs. And so I got exposure to glove puppets, and got exposure to shadow puppets, and I got exposure to tabletop, and I got exposure to all sorts of all the other marionettes, meeting all of the best puppeteers in the business, and meeting a ton of puppeteers who are still some of the dearest friends that I have now.
Yeah.
And finding this loving community where everyone is there to try and fail as hard as they can so they can learn how to do things well. And it was spectacular. So I went back as many times as I could, and I worked with Marty and Tim Lagasse a few times, and then I spread out and would just try and work with people that I knew had something to teach me. And I was lucky enough, privileged enough to get an emerging artist slot where they allowed me to sit in a basement room and write for a week. And I thought that was going to be it. And then, like halfway through, they had Roger Danforth came in and directed a scene of the thing I was writing, and had like Tyler Bunch was in it, and Jean Marie Keevens was in it, and Matthew Laird was in it, and who else? I want to say Jen Barnhart may have shown up at some point. It's like here's this cast of ridiculous talent doing my silly little scene that I wrote, and yeah, it's a marvelous place and really unlocked what the broader world of what it meant to me to be a puppeteer and how that linked in with all of the other things I've done in my life. It really showed how I wanted to do my theatrical work and how I wanted to do my video work. And actually, it like going to the O'Neill, I started getting away from doing video and doing more and more live work because I'd missed it and I didn't know I'd missed it. And I got away from doing Muppet stuff and got more into doing toy theater and object theater and some glove puppets and humanettes and all of these little rod things that I do. And just because I, after so many years of not knowing it was out there, getting really excited about, oh, this fits with what I want to do so much better.
Yeah, it's great when you can find like oh, this is my thing. I thought it was this thing, but now this is what I want to do. I want to do these live theatrical pieces. Well, my first thing that I saw that you performed was War Sheep, and which is still one of my all-time favorite puppetry pieces because here's my thing. It's like, I know things are very popular, but I love when those popular things kind of get poked at just a little bit, you know? And that's why I've always loved Weird Al,
Yeah.
is because it's like, I don't really like the original of this song that he's parodying. And I know I'll probably get in trouble for this, but like the one that made me really realize that was Smells Like Nirvana, because I was just not really into Nirvana at the time. And I was just like, oh, this is so, and then his song came out and I go, this is perfect. And I kind of see that as War Sheep was a little bit of the same thing, because it was like, well, here's this show that everybody, War Horses is the greatest puppetry we have. And then here comes War Sheep. And I just like, I tears like the first time I saw, like, I think people were like looking at me but I would love to know, was that something that going into that, I don't know, 2000, I don't know when that was, but 2014 maybe,
Yeah,
something
I
like,
would
I don't
have to
know.
go check. I'm not
Yeah.
sure.
But was that something you had the idea going in, or was that
No,
something that hit you there?
it was almost it was basically a dare. I was sitting, it was like the first night of the O'Neill or first lunch probably at the O'Neill, and I was sitting at a table with Liz Hara and Robert Smythe, and they were both complaining about Warhorse. I had never seen it. I still have never seen it. Uh, I know next to nothing about it on purpose because I looked at it and went, "Oh yeah, a puppet's pretty. Eh, story doesn't interest me." And I've definitely gotten to a point in my life where it's not enough for it to be puppets. It has to be something I actually want to see.
Right.
So I was listening to them being hilarious, talking about this show that everyone was complaining about, and everyone was complaining about it that year because that was when they had expanded and Like everyone in puppetry had gone out for the audition, and not one single person had gotten hired because they went with actors and dancers and trained them to do the puppetry. I suspect it was a union thing. I don't know. I've never found out. So they were just talking about the show. And so during that conversation, I basically said, like, so I should do this, right? And I think it was Robert that was like, yes, you should absolutely do this. Okay. And then, and it was, yeah, it must have been the first day because we had the pitch meeting for participant projects that night. And so I stood up and said, well, I have this idea. It's a very stupid idea, but I'm going to do it anyway. Uh, Anyone who want to join? And like, I got mobbed with talent. And so I had Katie Mack and Brad Shure as my main performers, and just I had actually already built. The reason why it was sheep is because I already had the puppet. I had done puppets for a production of, wow, the show has gone away. Gypsy. There we go. And there's this song in Gypsy, Little Lamb. And so I built this puppet that, and all the puppets that I built for this show had to be like brown paper and kind of ragged and look old and thrown together, which was great because that's what we could afford. And so it was this brown paper lamb, uh, and I built it so that the legs were attached to a couple rods that slid into pockets in your toes on your shoes. And so as you walk, you could make the lamb hop around. And then there was just a rod on the head that you could make it look around. And very, very simple puppet that needed to be, last for 21 shows for 5 minutes a show. So I had the puppet in my car and like, well, or sheep. Sure. Why not? I don't have a horse puppet, but I have a sheep puppet. And it's like, it's sort of the same. Like you can see the puppeteer. We'll put them in period costume, uh, like, and they're like doing all of the movements alongside the. Sure, that'll work. And what's the story of Warhorse? Oh, I don't know. I'll just make it something about like Nazis and like, and we'll make the puppet blow up because that's funny. And yeah, it came out of that, and having incredible talent working with me and just doing a ridiculous play on a show that I'd never seen.
Well, it was great, and it just shows. I mean, to me, that shows the sort of magic of the O'Neill. I mean, I've only been one time, but to you not have that idea, you don't go in having that idea. You have that idea the first day, and then you pitched it and you made it, and then it was in the participant, like little showcase thing. But then it got moved to the night
Big
show
show.
as well because it was such a hit. And to just be able to do that in a week, it was just fantastic. And still one of my, just crying laughing because
Thank you.
it's just genius. Well, I also want to talk about UBU FAUST because that is your one man show, and you got to tour all over the world. Can you give us like for anyone who hasn't seen it, sort of like what the concept of the show is, and then we'll break it down and we'll talk about you know the nuts and bolts.
So that was my most literary pursuit. I decided that I would. Well, to start, it's a mashup of Alfred Jarry's Ubu Wa, Punch and Judy shows, and Faust myths, uh, particularly the Marlowe version of Faust. But I did draw upon multiple versions to sort of see where Faust came from. And it came entirely out of, here are three things that I've always felt I should like, and three things that I love the classical imagery of, the iconography, the design choices. I love the way they look, and I've never liked them. I don't like Ubu. I don't like Punch and Judy shows. I have. rarely seen a Faust that was worth my time. Even though here are all these elements of incredible wonder and like horror and and comedy and like all of these things should work for me and they just don't. So I gave myself a challenge to, well, what if I make a version that I liked? And in doing the research, I was also seeing, like, I read later Ubu plays by Jarry, and the second Ubu is basically a play on Faust. The first Ubu is basically Macbeth. And I also noticed that the first Ubu, very intentionally, had a similar sort of structure to a Punch and Judy show, in terms of the classic, like, now so and so shows up, now so and so shows up. Jarry was a fan of puppet theater. One of the first Ubu shows was actually a puppet show, and the main character was partly a play, a parody of his teacher that he didn't like, that he made a puppet of. And so it was like, here are all of these elements. Let me see if I can pull them together. And it started with that idea and a pile of books. And then I went to a writer's retreat that was actually, it came about because Heidi Rugg, who is another puppeteer who has been to the O'Neill several times, is also uh, big in the National Capital Area Puppetry Guild. And so Heidi and her husband Sam had a house in Vermont that they had access to that had a bunch of bedrooms. And after the O'Neill one year, she was like, if I just like invited people up to the house for a week, do you want to do a writer's workshop? And we were all like, yeah, that sounds cool. And so we had Martin Kettling, who was uh, worked in the lit office at the O'Neill for years and was dramaturg there for a while. He came up and ran the thing, and a bunch of us showed up and sat and wrote for a week. And so I came out of that with a 60-page first draft of what would become Ubu Faust. After that, I put it in a drawer. I let it sit there for a while. Every now and then I'd take it out and I'd read it again and I'd go, cut, change, move, put this over here. That joke doesn't work. This joke should go here. And okay, let me put it away again. And then I'd pull it out and go, okay, logistically, can I do that scene at all? No. Okay, well, what am I thinking? If it's a humanette versus a hand puppet, okay. And then I put it away. And so it took some time after the initial writing to let it sit in the and ferment. But finally, Jim Godwin was like, hey, Dixon Place does this cool puppet block thing where we do workshops of shows in progress, and I think you should do it. And I said, okay. When is that? And like, right before the O'Neill. Okay. Great. So I got an old suitcase and I rigged it into a puppet stage and I started building puppets and vaguely memorized my lines, and I did the show and then immediately got on a train to go to the O'Neill. But that was also the year of the National Puppet Festival, and Amy Rush was like, I think you should do that show again at the side festival that we're doing. Like, okay. So I did it there and got a little bit more under my belt. And then I started touring it around. And I I would just book like a day at go up to Boston and do a puppet show place. Like right after, like we'll do a half slam and then my show, or go down to New Orleans and do it for a weekend at the puppet theater down there. And as I did it more, I was like, okay. And every time I'd mount it, I would alter the script a little bit here, a little bit there, until I finally had sort of a tight 35 pages. And at that point, I was like, and now it's time to go to Edinburgh. And so I was lucky enough to have worked in Edinburgh for years, working for a theater program that would help staff high school and college productions from mostly the States and Canada, taking their first show to Edinburgh Fringe. And we would provide technical support and front of house support. And for that, I would get a place to stay and my airline covered. And when I was off work, I was at the Fringe. So it was a great thing. I got to do that for a few years. And my old boss was actually the head of that program for a while, and he was able to produce my show. And we were able to put my show in one of the venues where I'd worked before. In fact, I worked it the same year that I performed. I was working during the day in one theater upstairs, and then I'd go get lunch and go change and then come back and do my show downstairs at night. And I got to the extraordinary experience of performing the same show every day for 3 weeks, every night, and also trying to promote it, which was maddening. And but it was fun. I met some great folks over there, fellow performers, and it was sort of a graduation of sorts for me figuring out, like, this is the kind of thing I want to do. I want to do this length of show, one man show, suitcase show. Some, like, whenever I'm coming up with new work now, it's always like, how small can I make this so that I can travel with it? So my new show is very similar. It's built so that it folds up into one case and one flat thing that's about 2 foot by 3 foot, and then it unfolds into a fortune-telling booth.
Is that Madam Edgewise?
Yes, Madam Edgewise tells your fortune.
Yeah. So that's going to be a full-length show.
I'm hoping.
Yeah.
I honestly haven't figured it out yet. I just got finished workshopping it, and so we've done one workshop performance at Dixon Place in New York, and then 2 more performances at the Center at West Park in New York as part of the Object Movement Festival. And those were roughly 20 minutes, 15 to 20 minute shows. And I think that there was definitely elements of them that I was rushing. So I think that I can probably stretch the show out to be more 35, 45, something like that. But it's really weird because it's so different from anything else I've ever done, because it's not scripted. It's script influenced improv, which is, I mean, definitely going back to the sketch troupe, improv troupe that I was in right after college. We were supposed to be a sketch troupe, but no one ever wanted to write anything down. So we were an improv troupe that would rehearse, and mostly rehearsing was a few of the guys would come to my house, eat my Pop-Tarts, and we'd talk about the beginning and ending of every sketch. And then we go and we'll fill the middle with funny stuff. And whenever we had a really good sketch, I would film it and then write down the script, transcribe what we said, and then give that to the guys. So they would look at it, forget half of it, and then I'd film that. And then, we had maybe 5 sketches that were ever any good because we would workshop them on stage that way. But this, I haven't done it enough times to know what that element is. I just have the character, and I have the tarot deck, and I've got the set, and actually it comes back to that thing of me drawing. Most of the show is me drawing, and drawing live on stage upside down, because of the problems of where to put the camera and how to make it project properly. And so I'm drawing little toy theater puppets upside down and then making an improvised show out of it.
Amazing. I can't wait. I want to find a way to get out to see you because I would love to see that.
Yeah, the Object Movement Festival did film the performances. I haven't watched them yet. They're sitting in 2 open tabs. I can look at them right now on my screen. And I was supposed to watch them yesterday, and I haven't gotten around to it. But I would not be surprised if at least some clips, if not a full show from that, ends up on my YouTube channel in the near future.
Perfect.
And as part of developing that show, as soon as my new computer shows up, which will have the capability of actually streaming well, I intend to take Madam Edgewise over to Twitch and do live improv shows on a regular basis there, to help sort of try out ideas. Twitch puppetry has been a really fun part of the pandemic for me. My friends Andy Manjek and Dorothy James did a weekly hour-long puppet show over the course of the pandemic. They did like 60 episodes in a row, just live on Twitch. Turn the thing on, whatever happens. That's great. And late night puppet talk show with special guest, and I got to go play with them a few times.
Yeah, that's a fun show. I've seen a couple episodes of
Yeah.
it. So yeah.
And actually, Dr. Cranium has shown up on the show a few times.
I'll have to search those out. I'll have to see if I can find the archive.
He's really bad about archiving them, so they may be lost to the ether. But yeah, Cranium ended up popping in for a couple shows.
Do you like explore? Do you because you were on YouTube with Jigsaw in the early days, and now you're talking about Twitch. Do you love or enjoy like kind of exploring these new ways to get content out there?
I like it whenever there's something that's democratizing in its simplicity. I like the fact that with these technologies, it means that anyone can try this kind of stuff out. Like if you want to do puppetry on camera, there are free tools now that allow you to do it well. I mean, Zoom and things like it, you can flip the camera so you got a perfect monitor. So you're not looking mirrored anymore. You're actually looking at the screen, and I've used that to practice monitor work dozens of times. And you can do that in most of the Twitch and streaming things. You can get it so that it's your screen is a monitor now. Where was that when I was coming up?
Right.
And it's just it's I wouldn't say it's my favorite by any means, and I wouldn't say that I have the time to really learn new technologies deeply anymore. But I do like it when they make it easy. Like, for Twitch, it's just like, okay, I can download this program and I can basically click go, and then I'm online and people can watch me. Cool. And I've been experimenting with it a little bit. It's like, yeah, sometimes no one's there, and that's fine, because now it's just like practice with using a camera for a show. And the new show, Edgewise, I have a camera because I'm drawing and it's small and it's hard to see if you're not in the front row. And so just getting used to having a technical element that I'm worrying about, because I've always done my shows to the point where just turn the lights on in the audience and I'll start talking. No sound cues, no light cues, nothing. Just like, do I need a microphone? You tell me. Can you hear me in the back? Okay. So this is the first show that has any sort of technical element. So having the ability to practice with that, where there's stakes, here's big air quotes for you, stakes of being live online with 3 viewers. But there's something to it where you feel this weird obligation, and you may feel this here. We're in podcast land. You have this sense of duty to, like you've made a contract with your fans, your followers, to produce a certain amount of content in a certain amount of time. And whether or not there's a monetary element to it, and whether or not there's anyone who wouldn't say like, oh, you need to take a month off, that's fine. Like there's still the like it's a deadline, and deadlines mean that we focus, and we are all very scattered, especially these days. So anything that helps us focus is a good thing overall. I don't know if that answers the question, but
No, I think that's good. I think that's good. Because I also think because I've been doing a YouTube live stream for since like 2019 or something, and then just recently I started getting into Twitch, and doing some things on there, and it's like it's great, but then there's all this other stuff that's like, oh, you gotta say everybody needs to sub, and there's a hype train, and there's bits, and there's all this other, and it's like, I just want to do a show. That's all I want to do. Like, I don't know what these bits and subs and all this other stuff is. You know what I mean?
it's all
like,
just capitalism.
yeah. It's just like, just let me make people laugh for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
You know, that's my goal. I'm coming here. Well, as we wrap up here, I would love to ask you, I always ask this question at the end. Jonesy, what has been the highlight of your puppetry career so far?
Wow, that's rough. Not because there haven't been any, it's because there have been too many.
Well, you can say a few if you want. You don't have to pick just one.
I definitely think I had the wonderful opportunity to do a pilot with Pam Marciero and Jim Krupa. John Little built the puppets. Marta Moselle McRosty and Christine Dempsey were also on hand for that. And so like sitting around on rollies with Pam and Jim, smelling each other's funk and giggling at take 8, and just having them be so kind and so generous was an immense moment. I don't necessarily think my work in that show was particularly good, but the feeling of being embraced and just lucky to be doing puppetry was very, very tangible in that moment. And I would say UBU FAUST had some moments like on the flip side of that, where probably doing UBU FAUST at Gen Con may have been one of the best performances of it. And holding the audience because Noel McNeil hadn't gotten back yet. And not because he was Noel McNeil, but because he'd gone to get me a drink.
Well, that's a highlight. Noel McNeil got me a drink.
Yeah, Noel McNeil
Wherever
got me a drink. And that was it was just a great show. With like, I'd been doing it so long at that point that like I really felt it in my bones. And so if something went wrong, nothing could go wrong. I knew the show inside and out. Like, oh, this thing failed, well, I'll just fix it with funny. Yeah, so like it's weird to think that being in a conference center, like with fluorescent lighting in front of like 50 board game geeks and a few puppetry geeks, and it's like one of the best shows of my life. But it was absolutely one of the best shows of my life. Thanks, Stacy, for bringing me out there. That was awesome.
Stacy Gordon.
Yes.
Well, Brodrick, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to definitely link to your YouTube channel because everyone's got to check out your stuff.
Thank you so much.
If I was ever asked who some of my favorite puppeteers to watch perform are, Brodrick Jones would be at the top of the list. Many thanks to Brodrick for being on the show, and for links to some of Brodrick's work, as well as to some of the things we discussed, check out the show notes for this episode number 73, over at underthepuppet.com. Well, now it's time to announce the winner of episode 72's giveaway for a brand new copy of the book, Jim Henson's The Dark Crystal Bestiary. The question was, who gave Kristen Charney a tour of Jim Henson's Creature Shop after she wrote him a letter? And the answer was David Barrington Holt. And the winner is Maria G. Congratulations, Maria. Your copy of The Dark Crystal Bestiary is on the way. Now it's time for this episode's giveaway, and it is for a copy of the book Punch and Judy, A Short History with Original Dialogue by John Payne Collier. Scholarly yet entertaining, this chronicle traces the origin of puppetry's famous duo from Punch's birth in Italy to his travels across medieval Europe. In addition to examining the puppet show's moral and cultural significance, this book takes a look at the people behind the curtain. To be entered to win, simply answer this question from the episode you just heard. What did Brodrick Jones make the original Dr. Cranium puppet out of? When you find the answer, send it in an email to underthepuppet@gmail.com with the subject line giveaway, and you'll be entered to win. All entries for this giveaway must be received by July 15th, 2022. The winner will be chosen at random from all correct entries and be announced on the August 2022 episode of the show. One entry per household. Good luck. I want to send a special thank you out to all of the Saturday Morning Media Patreon patrons who help make this show possible. Patreon patrons at the producer level and above who get a special shout out are Vicky Sebring, David Akers, Tony Urbano, Kathy Crawford, Eve Cunning, and my great aunt Dorothy Bachoco. To become a patron, visit patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Under the Puppet. If you have questions, suggestions, or feedback about the show, call our voicemail line at 818-806-9604. Or click the Call the Show button in the free Under the Puppet app for iOS and Android. You can also send your feedback via email to underthepuppet@gmail.com. Or you can connect with the show on Instagram or Twitter by searching for Under the Puppet. And don't forget to send your favorite episode of Under the Puppet to your best friend so they can become a fan too. Thank you so much for listening. This episode of Under the Puppet was edited by Steven Staver and featured music by Dan Ring. Help spread the word about the show by sharing your favorite Under the Puppet episode with a friend. Under the Puppet is copyright 2022 Saturday Morning Media, Grant Bachoco executive producer, all rights reserved. www.saturdaymorningmedia.com. Under the Puppet proudly presents The Adventures of Timmy the Tooth Reunion. In this almost 90-minute video, you will hear great stories from the cast and crew who brought this amazing puppet show to life. Plus, you'll see never-before-seen artwork and exclusive behind-the-scenes video. Under the Puppet's Timmy the Tooth Reunion is available right now at timmy.underthepuppet.com. You've been listening to Saturday Morning Media. Stay tuned, we'll be right back.